What's going on, guys? Dottz Gaming here, and today I'm bringing you all my Magicka Necromancer PvP build for the Elder Scrolls Online Dragonhold patch, and this is my horror build. So with the changes to the game and Scalebreaker, and with the removal of Dizzying Swing, Stun in Dragonhold, I haven't really been enjoying my MagCro for a while. He was one of my favorite classes in the Elsewhere patch, but like I said, just with the way the game was last patch and the removal of Dizzy Stun this patch, I just haven't liked how MagCro has been playing over the patches and over the time. It's becoming less and less enjoyable for me. So I turned the class back into a Magicka Necromancer, which is what I actually originally played when I went to ZOS and tested the Necromancer originally. And I've actually been having a pretty good time with it. It's actually been pretty fun. Magicka Necro, it's obviously, it's got its problems, it's got its issues, it's probably one of the worst classes for solo gameplay, but it's fun. I feel like if blastbones could get some love and actually work, and if the tethers weren't so useless, that the class would be in a much better spot. But I think the biggest issue is just specifically for damage, just blastbones being unreliable. It kind of makes the burst of the class feel very RNG. But when everything lines up and when everything works, you got some big old damage, and we basically leaned into that because Magicka Necromancer has so much built-in innate tankiness. I tried to bake in as much damage as I physically could into this build so that when our burst goes off, it goes off and we chunk our opponents for big damage. So we went for very, very large damage on this build, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. This is just how I'm playing my MagCro, though, so if you guys would change something, go ahead and change it. If you don't like something I'm running, feel free to, make your altercations, or if you don't want to run this build, feel free to pass it by. This is just what I've been using and what's been working for me on MagCro in Dragonhold. So our monster set is actually going to be 2 pieces of Slimecraw. I'm actually going with Slimecraw for the MagCro to give us that minor berserk. So the biggest thing I think anybody will notice when they start playing MagCro is that the damage does not necessarily feel the best. So to help with that, I put Slimecraw on to basically just give us a passive 8% damage boost to all of our damage, all of our outgoing damage. So I feel like it really helps give MagCro the burst damage potential it really needs to do what it needs to do. Eventually, I think if the class gets some nice damage buffs, this will eventually be changed to Bloodspawn. But for now, Slimecraw has really helped so that when my damage does land, it lands hard. So it really helps pad that damage a lot. Now, we have 2 primary 5 pieces on the build, and they both pretty much do the same thing. One of them is Crafty Alfiq, which gives us 5 lines of Maximum Magicka. And the other one is Necropotence, which also gives us 5 lines of Maximum Magicka. So one is while a pet is active, and one is just flat Magicka. So basically, we run 10 flat lines of Maximum Magicka. Now, I believe that Necromancer is one of the best classes to do this on. You could also do this on Magdin, but I also feel that MagCro is one of the best classes to do it on because your pet will be up 100% of the time. A significant amount of our sustain and tankiness is tied to our pet on this build. So if we don't have our pet up, we are missing out on a lot. A lot is tied to our pet. So I felt that Necro works really well on MagCro. For any build that uses a pet up all the time, Necro is just one of the best sets to use. And then we paired it with Crafty Alfiq just for the pure max Magicka stack. We almost ignore our spell damage. We don't really run a whole lot. We just go pure into that Magicka stack because it works really well on this class. In terms of our traits, we run all impen on everything. We run 2 heavy and 5 light. We are using 4 prismatics and 3 Magicka glyphs. We run the 4 prismatics to give us that 14k minimum stam that I require. We run 1 spell damage and 2 Magicka recovery, all arcane, obviously, for our Magicka stack. We run an infused lightning staff on our front bar with the berserker glyph. I like this just for the consistent pressure that it provides. You could also feel free to run Nirnhoned with a berserker glyph here. I think it's pretty much like it's either here or there. It's really personal preference between the two, but I just prefer the consistent damage for this, just because, again, MagCro, I feel like needs the damage boost where it can get them. So having that consistent 450 weapon and spell damage up at all times, I feel, is very helpful. And we go with the lightning staff to buff our AoE damage. And then we have a defending and reinforced, should be Nernhoned, sword and shield on the back bar with Magicka glyph. And then this is poisons on the back bar with whatever poisons you want. And I'm pretty sure that covers gear. Gear is pretty straightforward, man. The Crafty Elfique Necro, it's staple for that max Magicka stack, and it's incredibly potent. Before we get into skills, I'll do the other stuff. We do Witch Mother's Potent Brew food for our recovery. We use the Mage Mundus again for that maximum Magicka stack. And we are a vampire for the recoveries, as well as getting Mist Form, which is the primary reason that I use it. So in terms of our skills, we are running Force Pulse as our spammable. I really like Ricochet Skull in theory, but in practice, it always feels too slow. It's my biggest issue with Ricochet Skulls. It's too slow. If they sped up the skulls, I would use them in an absolute heartbeat. But for now, I am using Force Pulse. Force Pulse just deals instant damage, has a chance for splash, has some pen off of the Destro passives. You can feel free to use Ricochet Skull if you don't like Force Pulse. They're pretty interchangeable, but between those two, I've been enjoying Force Pulse a little bit more. We have Stalking Drunk Bones is our primary burst skill, so we basically summon this thing, and it runs to our target, and it deals flame damage sometimes when it gets close. You know, the damage of this increases a shit ton the more it runs, the longer it chases your target. When this thing hits, it has the potential to hit incredibly, incredibly hard. So, you know, even though the skill has its problems, has its issues, we still have to run it because it is our primary burst damage. You're using Accelerating Drain as our stun. One thing that MagCro really does not have is a reliable CC. So we do use Accelerating Drain for that reason. I choose this morph, the one from Minor Expedition, because I feel that it combines very, very well with Mist Form. So you basically, when you want to stun somebody, you activate this, and then you block cancel it. So it'll use the stun, give you the Minor Expedition, and then you can go back into your damage. If you want to, honestly, like, if you are going for your burst, you could actually feel free to hold the drain on your opponent. You can go into, like, your like, you have your blastbones running to your target, like, go Colossus into the drain and hold the drain. The drain ticks really, really hard, so it is also worth holding this if you want to. But I prefer this over the ultimate regen morph, just because I think, you know, most of the time you will be block canceling this, and you'll only gain 5 ultimate at that point. So I would just rather have the movement, just because MagCro is a very slow class. So I would much rather have that Minor Expedition personally than a small bit of ultimate regen. We are using Deaden Pain. I originally had Mystic Siphon on the front bar here, but the more I've kind of played it and tested it, the more I felt that Deaden Pain's a little bit more required. Without it, I felt a little bit too squishy. And, like, I know 3% isn't, like, the most mitigation in the world, but it does really help, especially with the ultimate gen from Deaden Pain. It helps get us to our ultimate faster. And if we do consume enough corpses, we get a good uptime on major protection, which decreases our damage taken by 30%, which is an absolutely massive amount. So I really, really like Deaden Pain for the additional ult gen, tankiness, and a little bit of heals that it provides to us. We're also using Ellie Drain. Ellie Drain gives us a much needed boost to our sustained 600 effective magic recovery, and also gives us major breach on our target for some additional damage. So very, very good skill for Magicka Necromancer. We also used the Glacial Colossus. Got a really, really nice change going into Dragonhold. The initial hit dealing damage with this applies a major vulnerability for 8 seconds. 8 seconds, increasing your damage taken by increasing your opponent's damage taken by 30%. An enemy's hit cannot be affected by this for 20 seconds, but that's basically irrelevant to us because we won't have our ultimate again within that time. But this deals huge damage over 3 seconds, okay? 12k unbuffed with each smash, and applies major vulnerability for 8 seconds, which gets reapplied every smack, so it ends up being like 11 seconds of major vulnerability when all is said and done. So it's assuming all 3 smashes hit. So it's an incredibly, incredibly strong ultimate. Combines really, really well with Stalking Blastbones. Just deals massive, massive damage in an AoE to your opponents, which is the main reason we do run that lightning staff. Back bar. I actually use Resistant Flesh as my primary heal. I really, really like Resistant Flesh. I know some people don't like this skill, but I actually think it's very, very good for MagCro. This is a absolutely massive burst heal, and also increases our resistance equal to half the heal for 3 seconds. So it makes us tanky when we are burst healing ourselves. And combined with Dampen Magic, that resistance also will apply to our ward, which will also defend us really, really well. So if you like overlay the dampen magic and the resistant flesh, that is absolutely massive, massive amounts of burst healing and burst damage prevention. So people will have a decently tough time working through all that. And then we also have the Spirit Guardian as our pet, which gives us a little bit of a hot. So it gives us, 4.2k unbuffed healing every 2 seconds. But the main reason we use this is because it has the built-in buffer of the Swift set. It is a built-in 10% damage mitigation. So we literally have buffer of the Swift built into the class. So because of that, that's why I feel I can get away running such an aggressive setup in terms of our damage. So between the Spirit Guardian and between Zed and Pain, we get a lot of tankiness just from our skills, and we don't need to get as much of it from our gear. So I really, really like this pet for that reason. We also do use Summoner's Armor to just reduce the cost of blastbones, and the Mender just gives us a little bit extra sustain that the class desperately needs. We also do run Mist Form as our movement buff. Not much to say about it. I like this to be able to kite around. I also do like the Vampirism for the recovery. Really, really helpful for Necromancer because Necromancer sustain is pretty bad. But like I said, Elusive Mist is one of my favorite skills for kiting, especially on builds where I am more offensive, like I am on my gear. Having a more defensive kiting tool to me is a bit more useful. Like on my Mag DK build, for example, I have Swift and Blood Spawn, so I'm very, very tanky. So I'd prefer to go with Race Against Time for the offensive Root Break. But for this build, because the gear is very offensive in nature, I prefer to go with the defensive Root Break via Elusive Mist. Plus, we also have the on death passive for 33% more mitigation as we get lower. So it just combines really, really well with our percent mitigation stack from the Spirit Guardian and from Dead and Pain. And then finally, we also have Temporal Guard on our back bar, making us that much tankier with another 8% damage mitigation on that back bar. Incredibly, incredibly potent. I really, really like the combination of these skills a lot for defense. You also can use this if you want to get fancy, but for the most part, we just have this slotted for the minor protection. In terms of our stats, so assuming that we do have our pet up, okay, this is what we're looking at stat-wise. 48k maximum Magicka on the front bar and about 49k on the back bar. We have 18.8k maximum health, which is over 25k in Cyrodiil, 14k maximum stam. With our pet up, we have about 2k unbuffed recovery. With the pet down, it goes down to 1680, but the pet will be up 100% of the time, so you'll always have that 2k unbuffed recovery before anything else kicks in. We have 1767 spell damage, but that's not really where our primary damage is coming from. It is coming from our Magicka pool. We also have 32.6% spell critical, which will go up with our potion. 12k unbuffed spell resist, and 10k unbuffed physical resist. Back bar, that goes up to, if I can actually pull it up, 17k and 15k with 3k crit resist. Like I said, Mage Mundus, Vampirism, Witch Mother's Potent Brew. For our potion, we use Essence of Spell Power. One of the things that I also feel about Magicka Necromancer in particular is it really struggles to get a lot of major and minor buffs from its class kit. So because of that, we need to get them from external sources. The bars feel very cramped, similar to Magicka Nightblade. So being able to get Sorcery and Prophecy off of my potion just allows me to run more useful skills on my bar without having to try to cram these buffs onto my bars. So really like running the pots. In terms of our CP, we were running 32 into Blessed, 56 into Elfborn, 64 into Elemental Expert, 46 into Spell Erosion, and 72 into Master in Arms, 61 into Ironclad, 54 into Resistant, 37 into Thick Skin, 43 into Hardy Nelly Defender, with 32 into Quick Recovery, 19 into Sprinter, 66 into Warlord, 75 into Arcanist, 44 into Shadow Ward, and 66 into Tumbling. You could also flop the Tumbling and Shadow Ward if you want to go for some more block on your back bar instead. In terms of rotations, pretty straightforward. You want to maintain the pet, your armor buff at all times. On your opponent, you want to maintain Ellie Drain at all times. Now, when you're going for your damage, you just want to do two things. You want to just continually fire blastbones at your opponent and use Force Pulse. When you want to go for your burst, you're just going to simply have the blastbones charge toward your target, drop the Colossus, and press your accelerating drain to stun them inside of it. You could also do it the reverse. I think that probably might be a little bit more reliable, is hit the drain and then drop the Colossus afterwards, and then the blastbones should land. It will deal the damage on the vulnerability, and then you can just pepper them with Force Pulses to execute them. So that's kind of the burst rotation you want to use. Defensively, I like to personally go into a into a shield, and then into a burst heal after that. So the burst heal will give us a ton of resistance. The shield will protect that heal and to allow us to give it that burst heal. And then we'll also be getting dot healed from our pet. So that will be giving us that little bit of tick healing. Like I said, very similar to how I run it on my Mag Sork, where I have a burst heal, a shield, and a hot. And I also have a hot from Dead in Pain, so you want to use Dead in Pain anytime this corpse is around you to keep the hot, the ultimate regen, and the major protection rolling. But that is pretty much it, guys. That is my Magicka Necromancer for the Dragonhold patch. I think if MagCro got a couple of key buffs, it'd be in a much better spot. Main thing I just think is Dragonbones needs to, or excuse me, Drunk Bones, Blast Bones, whatever, needs its bugs fixed. It's the biggest thing holding Necromancer in general back from being a super viable class. I feel like the big thing that holds Necro back is just a lot of its mechanical limitations. So I feel like once those are actually fixed, we can really see what buffs the class needs to actually put it in a much more respectable spot for PvP. But it's still pretty fun, and I enjoy it. So hopefully you guys, if you try it, you enjoy this build as well. So if you guys like this, please smack a like on it. Any questions about the build, leave a comment below. And for more great gaming content, please hit that sub button as well as the bell to keep notifications on. So thank you all so much for stopping by. Appreciate it very much. As always, I'm Dottz Gaming, and I'll see you all in the next one.